The moment Ethan Lockwood saw her, time stilled. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, something ancient. She sat at the corner of the cafe, stirring her tea absent-mindedly, her dark eyes distant, as if she were waiting for someone. As if she were waiting for him. A strange déjà vu crawled up his spine. He knew her, but that was impossible. He had never met this woman before in his life. And yet, when she looked up, locking eyes with him, a flicker of recognition passed through her face too, like a secret neither of them remembered but both felt. For a moment, neither moved. Then, as if waking from a dream, she grabbed her coat and rushed out of the cafe. Ethan should have let her go, but something inside him screamed, "Follow her." He hesitated for only a second before chasing after her. He found her 2 blocks away, standing beneath a flickering street lamp, staring at him like she had seen a ghost. "Who are you?" he asked, breathless. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer immediately. Then, in a quiet, shaky voice, she whispered, "You don't remember me, do you?" A chill ran down his spine. "I don't even know your name," Ethan admitted. She let out a bitter laugh. "You did. Once." The weight of her words unsettled him. She was speaking as if they had history, as if they had shared something profound. But he was certain he had never met her before. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photograph. Ethan's chest tightened as he took it from her. It was an old, yellowed image of a man in a military uniform. A man who looked exactly like him. His breath hitched. "What the hell is this?" His fingers tightened around the photograph. She took a shaky breath. "Your name was Ethan Lockwood then too." Ethan wanted to laugh. Wanted to tell her that this was some elaborate joke, that she had mistaken him for someone else. But deep inside, something twisted. Memories that didn't belong to him stirred. Flashing images of war, of a dimly lit train station, of a woman's tear-streaked face whispering, "Come back to me." His pulse pounded in his ears. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I've spent my entire life searching for you, Ethan." The sincerity in her voice struck him like a hammer. This wasn't just some delusion. This was real. "I think we've been caught in a loop," she continued, voice shaking. "Lifetime after lifetime, we find each other. But each time, you die before we can have our chance." Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. "That's insane." She nodded. "I thought so too, until I started remembering." Ethan wanted to walk away. He wanted to convince himself that this was just a coincidence. But as he looked into her eyes, something inside him cracked open. The way she said his name felt familiar. The way she looked at him made something in his chest ache. And then the dream started. That night, as he lay in bed, fragmented images flooded his mind. A battlefield soaked in blood. His own hands, trembling as he held onto a letter. A woman in a red dress running toward him, screaming his name. Then pain. A gunshot. Darkness. Ethan woke up, drenched in sweat. He barely had time to catch his breath before his phone buzzed. A single message lit up the screen. "Meet me. I'll explain everything." The next morning, they sat across from each other in a secluded bookstore. She told him everything. How she had memories from lifetimes ago. How they always found each other, drawn together by something beyond their control. And how, every time someone, ensured they could never be together. Ethan scoffed. "You're saying someone is trying to stop us?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I don't think it's just fate keeping us apart. I think someone doesn't want us to remember." The air between them grew heavy. "Then why do I remember now?" Ethan asked. She reached out, brushing her fingers against his wrist. "Because maybe, this time, we have a chance to change it." He barely had time to process her words before the bookstore door slammed open. A tall man in a dark coat entered, his piercing gaze locking onto them immediately. Lillian went pale. "It's him." Ethan frowned. "Who?" She grabbed his hand and whispered, "Run." And before he could ask another question, she was pulling him toward the back exit. They barely made it out before the man's voice echoed through the store. "Ethan Lockwood, you weren't supposed to wake up." Ethan's heart pounded as he and Lillian dashed into the dimly lit alley behind the bookstore. The cold night air burned his lungs, but he didn't dare slow down. Behind them, the sound of footsteps echoed, steady, relentless. "Who is he?" Ethan demanded, barely able to keep up with Lillian's frantic pace. She didn't answer. She just pulled him forward, her grip tight, her breath ragged. They turned a corner and ducked into an abandoned building. Lillian pressed her back against the wall, placing a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. The footsteps stopped outside. Ethan held his breath. Through the crack in the doorway, He saw the man standing in the alley, scanning the darkness. His sharp eyes glowed under the flickering streetlight. Then slowly, he turned and walked away. Lillian exhaled shakily, releasing Ethan's hand. "We don't have much time," she whispered. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "Tell me what's going on. No more riddles." Lillian hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but once I tell you, there's no turning back." She led him deeper into the abandoned building, where moonlight streamed through broken windows, casting eerie shadows. "I wasn't lying when I said we've lived this before," she began. "But I didn't tell you everything." Ethan's throat tightened. "Then start talking." She took a deep breath. "In every lifetime, we find each other. But someone always interferes. You always die before we can escape together. This time, I tried to change things, to find you before they did. But they know, and they'll do anything to stop us." Ethan shook his head. "This is crazy. Who are they?" "The Keepers," she whispered. "They control the cycle. They decide who remembers their past lives and who doesn't. And they've been watching us for centuries." Ethan scoffed, but his gut twisted. It sounded impossible, except he had seen the dreams. He had felt the memories clawing their way back. "Why us?" he asked. Lillian hesitated. "Because we were never supposed to meet again. We broke a rule. And now they have to erase you again." Ethan's chest tightened. This was insane. And yet, deep inside, something told him she was right. Before he could respond, a sharp click echoed through the building. Lillian's eyes widened. "They're here." Ethan barely had time to react before the windows shattered and dark figures swarmed in. Lillian grabbed his hand. "Run!" They sprinted down a narrow hallway, dodging falling debris. Behind them, the men in black coats moved with eerie precision, their footsteps silent, their faces unreadable. Ethan's mind reeled. Who are these people? How did they always find them? They burst through a rusted door into the street. Lillian pulled Ethan toward a waiting car, its engine already running. "Get in," she shouted. The driver, a wiry man with silver hair, didn't even look back as he floored the gas the moment Ethan slammed the door shut. Bullets tore through the night, shattering the rear window. Ethan ducked as glass rained down. Lillian grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. We have one chance to break the cycle. One chance to stop running." Ethan swallowed hard. "How?" She held up a small, leather-bound book. "This." He stared at it. "What is it?" Lillian's hands trembled as she clutched it tighter. "The truth. The memories they don't want us to remember." The car swerved violently as the Keeper's vehicles closed in behind them. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Then we need to find out what's inside." Lillian nodded, her eyes filled with both hope and fear. "But once we do, there's no going back." The car sped into the darkness, with the shadows of the past chasing them. The tires screeched as their car tore through the empty streets. Ethan clutched the leather-bound book, his pulse hammering. Behind them, the Keeper's vehicles closed in fast, their headlights piercing the darkness like predators hunting their prey. Lillian's voice was urgent. "We have to open it. Now." Ethan hesitated. Something about the book felt heavy, not just in his hands, but in his soul. He knew, the moment they read what was inside, everything would change. With a deep breath, he flipped it open. The pages were filled with symbols, old writings and languages he shouldn't understand, but somehow did. Memories hit him like a flood, visions of past lives, of different centuries, different worlds. But in every one, it was always him and Lillian. Always together. Always torn apart. Then, the final truth surfaced. "We were never supposed to exist," Lillian whispered, her eyes wide. "We were created outside the rules." Ethan's breath hitched. The Keepers weren't just stopping them from being together. They were trying to erase them completely. A gunshot rang out. The back tire exploded, and the car skidded, flipping onto its side. Ethan barely registered the pain as they crashed, his grip still tight on the book. Dazed, he crawled out of the wreckage. The Keepers surrounded them, their leader stepping forward, the same man from the bookstore. "This ends now," the man said, his voice cold. "You were never meant to remember." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then why do I?" "L'Immensite. Because love, real, forbidden love, is stronger than time." Lillian staggered beside Ethan, bruised but defiant. "You can't stop us." The man shook his head. "We don't need to." He gestured to the book. "Now that you know the truth, the cycle will break on its own." Ethan looked at Lillian. He could feel it, the world shifting, the weight of countless lives unraveling. They had spent lifetimes running. Now they had a choice. Lillian reached for his hand. "If we let go, we can finally be free." Ethan swallowed hard. Together? She nodded. With a final look at the keepers, Ethan dropped the book. The wind carried its pages into the night, erasing the past, the pain, the cycle. The keepers faded into the darkness. The world around them blurred, but this time, there was no fear. Just peace. Lillian smiled. We did it. And for the first time in eternity, Ethan knew they had won. If you love this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts below, and share this with someone who believes in fate, love, and second chances.